I'm Patrick Pacheco. Coming up on Theater, All the Moving Parts, our theater experts give you the inside track on what are the must-sees as the new season unfolds on Broadway and off. Hello, I'm Patrick Pacheco. Welcome to Theater, All the Moving Parts. Joining me for a thrilling look at the new theater season are critics Helen Shaw of The New Yorker, Adam Feldman of Time Out New York, and Zachary Stewart of TheaterMania. Welcome back, Adam and Helen. Unfortunately, Jan Simpson had a scheduling conflict, but welcome to Zach Stewart, who's joining us for the show.
Thank you for having me, Patrick. 10
shows have so far opened this season since the Tony Awards, and there will be 6 more before the end of the year. The Shark is Broken is about to end its run. It's limited engagement on November 19th, but also playing are Here Lies Love, Back to the Future, Gutenberg the Musical, Merrily We Roll Along, Jaja's African Hair Braiding, and Purlie Victorious. We get this question all the time. What shall I see?
That's a question I get all the time also, and the only answer I can give usually is what do you want to see? Because these shows are so different, and many of them have very good things about them in different ways. So if I had only one show to see, it would probably be Merrily We Roll Along.
Pick yourself a road, get to know the countryside. Soon enough you're merrily, merrily practicing dreams. Dreams that will explode, waking up the countryside, making you feel merrily.
But I saw it last year when it was off-Broadway, but I think it's a beautiful revival of a Stephen Sondheim show that a lot of people don't know very well because it only played for a couple of weeks when it opened the first time on Broadway 40 years ago.
It's doing very, very good business, Helen. Is that because of its cast, do you think, or the Sondheim name?
I mean, I assume it is the cast, at least partially. It is a very starry cast with Daniel Radcliffe, Jonathan Groff, and Lindsay Mendez, all marvelous, all doing great work. If I were to send people to one show, it might be Purlie Victorious, because it's such a rare opportunity to see it. It hadn't been revived on Broadway since it first ran in, I want to say
1961.
1961. And I had an amazing time at the theater when I saw it. I think Purlie Victorious is something that you might have to, find out about, be coaxed to, whatever, simply because it isn't the name on everybody's lips. And I thought it was, as I say, it was absolutely such a delight and a pleasure to see. I think that I could almost guarantee that someone would have a good time.
We should say that it's directed by Kenny Leon, and it is starring Leslie Odom Jr., Quiara Young in spectacular performances, along with a great ensemble. The subtitle gives a hint as to what it's about, and that is a non-Confederate romp through the cotton patch.
Yeah, while I was watching it, I thought, my Lord, I haven't seen something that crackles like this. Ossie Davis didn't write too many plays, but he did not have a long, history of being a playwright. But for Purlie, he wrote a part for himself, and he knew exactly what he could do, which was be simultaneously an amazing pulpit figure and a mischievous sort of a trickster figure. And that writing himself this spectacular dialogue, which is sort of half King James Bible, half flim-flam, is just, and then he wrote the other part for his wife, for Ruby Dee. And so you have something where it has just been served to these actors who are ready to take on the sort of lickety-split dialogue, are just going to have the most wonderful time with it.
Oh, child, being colored can be a lot of fun when ain't nobody looking.
Ain't it the truth? I always said I never pass for white, no matter how much they offer me, unless the things I love could pass too.
Ain't it the beautiful truth?
To me, it is a little bit that he is actually reflecting, like Ossie Davis, the playwright, is reflecting language that he heard in pulpits in Georgia when he was growing up.
What would you recommend?
I'm going all in on Here Lies Love. I've been such a booster of this show since it was downtown at the Public at 2013. It's not like anything else that's on Broadway right now. They've ripped out all of the orchestra seats at the Broadway Theater and turned it into a nightclub. This is a real event, and I think in the post-pandemic era, audiences really need a compelling reason to come to Midtown Manhattan and be exactly where they need to be at 8 p.m. when they can stay at home and see many great dramas and pause and go to the bathroom or make snacks in their kitchen. This is that. This is a party. It's about Imelda Marcos, who is still alive and I imagine has done a victory lap around the presidential palace in Manila now that her son, Bong Bong, is the president. So it is a very relevant story, but it's told through the music of David Byrne, frontman of the Talking Heads. It's an incredible party. Go to it.
I was of that generation that sort of watched the People's Power movement and was just riveted by when, of course, the Marcoses were actually chased away by the Filipino people. And the irony of that show now, of course, is Cory Aquino, the wife of the assassinated political activist who actually started the People's Power movement, then took office. It was followed by Rodrigo Duterte, who was also oppressive, and then by Bong Bong. So it kind of comes full circle. It's a mixed bag. What's fascinating and fabulous about it is the all Filipino or Filipino-American cast. It's a really fun show as well. And a romp with very serious political overtones.
We're living in the age of nostalgia for the strong man. And so this is a full-throated musical that's very much about that.
Very much. Does anybody want to say anything about Back to the Future, which apart from Merrily We Roll Along, which you brought up, is doing the best commercial business?
We all shifted uncomfortably. I hope the cameras caught the kind of. Oh, I will say that the best marketing I have seen for Back to the Future is an NFL ad, in which they interview various NFL players about what they've seen on Broadway, and I think 80% really put their muscle, which is significant, behind Back to the Future. It is thrilling to see, out on the field, still in their pads, these guys saying, look, you've got to see Back to the Future.
Back to the Future was really good too. I highly recommend Back to the Future. I was surprised. I want to go see that again.
How is the Back to the Future? Because that's new. It is a must-watch.
Yeah, let me tell you right now, okay? We saw Back to the Future. That was incredible. Okay, that was unbelievable.
Did I have a good time?
Audience, yeah.
No, but this is not only for me.
Adam?
Yeah. It's not my kind of show. If it's making people happy, then great. They should be happy. I was not particularly happy at that show.
The only thing that I would say is that I wish Bob Gale, who co-wrote the original film, which I thought was very clever, I wish that he had not written the book. It was kind of like the problem with Woody Allen writing the book to Bullets Over Broadway. I don't think, generally speaking, and Zach, I don't know if you agree with me on this or not, generally speaking, the person that is the screenwriter for a film that is then being adapted to the Broadway stage should write the book.
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, I suffered through Almost Famous, so I know that quite well, and Diablo Cody looked as surprised as anyone when she picked up her Tony Award for Best Book of a Musical for Jagged Little Pill, which of course I guess wasn't a movie, but still, she's a screenwriter. You know, I was walking by the Winter Garden a couple of days ago, and there was a DeLorean parked outside on Broadway, and a man with wild hair emerged from it, holding a sign with someone's last name on it. And I wondered if this was an extension of the producer's business for this musical. I mean, this show is critic-proof. It comes with its own audience, and people who are going to make a whole night of it and spend $1,000 to hire a DeLorean to take them to and from the theater. So, you know, that, again, is a compelling reason maybe to show up to the Theater District if you were a real fan of this show.
We should say Roger Bart is in it, obviously, and Casey Likes, with you having mentioned Almost Famous.
Well, Roger Bart, I think, is quite entertaining in it, and Casey Likes is a talented guy, and it's unfortunately, I feel like in the same way a little bit that this original screenwriter is too attached to maybe his original conception of the movie, this performance has been directed, Casey Likes' performance has been directed to be an imitation of Michael J. Fox's performance. That's, I guess, what people want to see in the audience. They want to recall the original experience that they had in the '80s with it.
Go, Johnny, go, go, go. Johnny, be good.
Gutenberg, the musical, had its off-Broadway incarnation. I think it started the Upright Citizens Brigade by the two creators of Beetlejuice, who got then it went off-Broadway. Now it's on Broadway with Josh Gad and Andrew Rannells. What do you think, Helen?
They were the comic duo in Book of Mormon. Part of the pleasure there is watching Josh Gad try to throw a wrench into whatever machine is moving, and Andrew Rannells just sort of, you know, muscling through and re-screwing it together on the fly. And that is actually one of the reasons why I'm excited to see it. I love to watch, I am a little bit of a sadist, and so the idea of watching performers who are you know, that there is that sadistic quality, that Josh is there to sort of torture Andrew for the 90 minutes that this show will go on. I'm very excited to see that.
We love Broadway.
I love Broadway.
Yeah, we're gonna sing all the songs and play all the parts, and it's just the two of us, just me and Josh.
I can't wait to get back on stage with you, buddy. You know, movies are...
There's an excitement in seeing a one-person show or a two-person show. There's a tension that you have as an audience member. How are they going to be able to keep my attention for all of this time?
Yeah.
And when they do, it's, I think, very exciting. You come away with it with a feeling that they've really accomplished something. The opposite of that this season is Jaja's African hair braiding, because that's really such an ensemble cast where it's the wealth is spread so evenly around the stage that you get a different kind of pleasure from it, of just watching these different pieces in motion and how they all fit together. And that for me was the greatest fun about that production.
It's by Jocelyn Bio, who had fantastic plays prior to this off-Broadway. It's her Broadway debut. What can you say about that, Zach?
Oh, she just writes fantastic comedies that bring you in and you know, wrap you up in a big hug. And I think there's been this decidedly Brechtian turn in the theater, right, where playwrights and directors and actors are trying to teach the audience, you know, or convert the audience or make the audience better. And I never get that feeling from her plays. They're just good comedies, and they're inviting you into the party.
And I think that that's absolutely true of Purlie Victorious as well. You know, it's just fun and very amusing, and has you can come away with having learned quite a lot at the same time. What's fascinating about it is that it's being produced by LaChanze and Taraji Henson. And it's kind of a continuation of a trend that started when Oprah Winfrey produced The Color Purple. But it's picked up speed. There's a lot of celebrities that are now above the title of this season's shows. How do you suppose that helps sell tickets?
Well, it is mostly a publicity thing. They do contribute money, which obviously helps the production itself, but most of the time these are not the active lead producers on these shows. They're there to help garner attention for the show, to give their approval to it, to get some press to it. And there's a certain prestige that is still attached to it. You know, Jennifer Hudson recently put her name on a Broadway show, and then it won Best Musical. Now she's an EGOT winner because she was a producer of this show. You know, so there's some EGOT, I mean, she's won all the 4 major awards. And in her case, the award was for producing Strange Loop. She didn't put together that show, but she reaps a certain amount of benefit.
Long time in the making, several decades in the making, is Harmony by Barry Manilow and Bruce Sussman, directed by and choreographed by Warren Carlyle. It had a production at the Folksby downtown at the Jewish Museum of Heritage. Did anybody see it? And what can you say about it, Zach?
I was absolutely charmed by it. And I was wowed by Chip Zien, who plays an older version of one of these characters. This is about a real group of musicians called the Comedian Harmonists, several of whom were Jewish, and they were like a comedy musical troupe in 1930s Germany, which was not an easy place to do comedy, if you can imagine that.
And not a great place to be a Jew.
I don't think so. And this is very much their story. He survived. Chip Zien plays this person as an older gentleman looking back on this story and retelling it, but also plays Marlene Dietrich and several other characters throughout the thing. It's an extraordinary performance. I can't wait to see it again on Broadway. And I'm already going to call it, he's going to be nominated for a Tony for this.
It's one of the most unattractive impersonations of Marlene Dietrich I've ever seen on stage.
Don't tell Chip.
I don't think you ever went to Eastern Bloc, that old bar in the East Village late at night. You might have seen worse.
We'll have to check that out. It was an international sensation. They were so popular that the show opens to a sold-out concert at Carnegie Hall.
How brilliant they are.
Adam, as a gay man, when I go see a gay play or a gay-themed play, I know that I'm looking at it from a different lens. Mm-hmm. As a Jewish critic, if you see something, like Harmony or Prayer for the French Republic, mm-hmm. Does that affect the lens that you see it through?
I think it probably does. I mean, we all have our lenses, and if nothing else, these are subjects that I know a lot more about. So I will have a lot more background to draw from in talking about the show. I've been immersed in the particular cultures being depicted in these shows for all of my life. So that doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to like it more. In some cases, it might even mean I'm going to like it, or I'm going to be warier of it because I know too much about it and I have my own opinions for the issues being discussed. But I try to, as we all do, I think we try to set those parts of ourselves to some extent aside in evaluating it, and then bring some part of it to evaluating it in a more personal way in parts of the review. But you want to have that dual perspective when you're looking at any work of art. Your own experience as a person that you bring to the criticism of the show, and also your sort of platonic ideal of yourself as a fair and impartial idea of a critic. Neither of those two things is sufficient, really. Or possible in one case, to be completely impartial. But I think that they combine in different ways and they can bring different interesting things to a review of a show.
I mentioned Prayer for a French Republic, which I'm totally excited about. I saw it at Manhattan Theater Club when it was there by Josh Harmon. And I think it's a thrilling, epic play that I think deals with 5 generations of Jews. And like Leopoldstadt, it's do we stay or do we go? It's either a suitcase or, death. Did you see it off?
Yeah,
did you see it off Broadway?
I did see it off Broadway. I liked it very much off Broadway. It's sort of a companion piece or a sequel to Leopoldstadt in some ways. Leopoldstadt is about very much the unkillability of anti-Semitism, that every generation thinks that it's getting better, but it's a temptation to believe that it's ever going to be gone.
Let's start at the beginning. But what is the beginning of a family? We have been in France for more than 1,000 years.
Here we have, a few decades later, we have this family, a very successfully assimilated French-Jewish family, who must now confront their identities as Jews, as other people in the society see them, in ways that they may not even have seen themselves for some time.
Stay together. Stay with your parents. You have to. In the end, that is what saved my life.
I think they work very well together. One thing that's interesting to me as a Jewish critic or as a gay critic or as a Canadian critic or whatever it is, the things that I am, is that, less in the case of Canadian, but we have a lot of cultural anxieties right now around reviewing cultures that aren't us. And so that can mean sometimes that people treat those cultures with kid gloves in evaluating their work if they do not belong to that culture. I think being gay or being Jewish or what have you empowers me to some extent to speak from the inside and in language and in certain kinds of complexity that I wouldn't assume to venture into for other cultures to which I don't belong. So to some extent, there's a freedom with that and also a responsibility with that.
Helen, do you share those cultural anxieties when you approach a play that is outside your culture?
Anxiety is probably the wrong word for it because that I'm anxious about so many things that it would be one more drop in the ocean. But the whole act of criticism is so much about trying to see the sort of to understand the full iceberg from the tiny tip, which is the performance that you're seeing, and so I think it's only hubris to think that you can completely understand or approach an understanding of a whole thing, since what you wind up seeing the night of the show itself is such a small thing comparatively. So I think that I hope, especially because all of us here have been writing a long time, is that we have run into those into walls in our own capacity to understand something, and we've had to kind of regroup and write our way through those sorts of things. So it isn't anxiety exactly, it's more like excitement because it's quite difficult and a little bit, and kind of the crucial challenge of the job, if that makes sense.
Can I ask you to relate what you just said very perceptively about a play called How to Dance in Ohio? It's a musical about...
I'm afraid I don't know anything about it. I'm so sorry.
It's based on a 2015 documentary about 7 autistic young adults preparing for a formal spring dance.
I've been coming here since I was in 2nd grade, and it's helped me get along better with people.
His hand goes on his shoulder. Okay.
You know, part of connecting with somebody is to move in similar patterns. Did you know that?
The musical is by Rebecca Greer-Milochek, I hope I pronounced that correctly, and Jacob Yandura, directed by Sammy Knold. And Hal Prince was working on it when he died, and it's dedicated to him. And the actors are autistic, on the autistic spectrum. So as what you just said in terms of talking about these lenses that you look at things, and as Adam just said about, are we treating it more kindly than we might otherwise?
I wouldn't say necessarily more kindly, but more carefully.
More carefully. Do you share in that? And Zach, do you share in that in terms of approaching a musical like How to Dance in Ohio?
This is making me think of a conversation you and I had a while ago around a certain musical where you said, you know, there's this invisible collaborator in the room, and I think this is the voice of Twitter or Facebook or social media. What are they going to say about me? And artists really suffer from this self-consciousness, and I think critics really suffer from this self-consciousness because we're creatures of the media, and you're constantly scrolling through your Twitter and looking at your mentions. And I think we have to resist that urge. I think artists are right now trying to resist that urge. I mean, one of the things I love about Josh Harmon, to bring it back to Prayer for the French Republic, is he puts very difficult conversations and contradictions on stage. And that's what I really like about him as a playwright, you know, things that will make the audience squirm. And I think that as critics, we owe it to our readers to be just as fearless. And I'm not always, right? I suffer from that kind of self-consciousness
but also, I mean,
as well.
but if we take a step back from that example, I mean, Harmon is a Jewish playwright, which is why he can do that with Jewish.
Who got into trouble with the title of one of his plays called Bad Jews.
Bad Jews, and even yes, certainly there will be criticism of him within the Jewish community for anything that he does. But would a non-Jewish playwright who wrote a play called Bad Jews about internecine struggles within the Jewish community, would that play be staged? I don't know, is the answer.
I think probably not.
Yeah.
We have to move on, but I wanted to get to another play that may be approached carefully to some extent, but fascinating, Appropriate, by Brandon Jacob Jenkins. It's an off-Broadway play that will now mark his Broadway debut. He's done exciting work off-Broadway. It's fascinating because it's about a white family returning after the death of their father to their old Arkansas plantation, surrounded by a cemetery of the enslaved dead who once worked it. So that's the fascinating connection of a Black playwright writing about a white family of white ones whose ancestors owned a plantation. Did you see it, Helen?
Off-Broadway, yes.
Yes,
I
please.
did.
Tell us about it.
Well, this will be a different production. Brandon Jacobs Jenkins is one of the colors in his palette is discomfort. And he is just fantastic at aiming it. It's like being in a room with one of those speakers that can kind of target seat by seat, you know? And you feel like different ripples of tension moving through a room based on a Jacobs Jenkins text. And this goes for his play Gloria, it goes for his play Nocturne, which is I kind of think his masterpiece, is that he is delighted by discomfort. And so that is, my memory of the play Appropriate was that it had that quality. Second Stage has been using their Broadway house to give playwrights their Broadway debut in recent seasons, which has been what a wonderful thing, what a gorgeous thing that is. And I think it's a wonderful sized house for people to do that in, and I am grateful to them for that programming. It is a funny coincidence that Jacobs Jenkins, who is a Black playwright, has an all-white cast in Appropriate. Larissa Fasthorse had an all-white cast for Thanksgiving play. And Young Jean Lee had an all-white cast in Straight White Men. Just in and of itself, that is dialectically interesting. That the move to Broadway, which some people see, I personally do not, but I can understand why people do, as a type of ascension, is happening for these playwrights with, just so happens to be, the plays that they wrote for all-white casts.
I want to go to a lighter note, Spamalot. It was at the Kennedy Center. Peter Marks gave it a rave review, and it is back.
Ready? Okay. K-I-N-G-A-R-T-H-U-R Arthur. K-I-N-G-A-R-T-H-U-R Arthur. Arthur King, the biggest and the coolest thing.
Who's the king?
You are.
Who's the king?
You are. A-R-T-H-U-R.
Are you looking forward to it?
I asked for tickets to the original production for my 19th birthday when I first moved to New York. So and I stage doored it, and I got everyone's autograph except for Tim Curry, who looked over my shoulder and went, oh, and retreated into the Schubert Theater. So I'm absolutely looking forward to seeing this with an all-new cast, James Monroe Iglehart, who is hilarious.
Christopher Fitzgerald. You know, and as the Lady of the Lake, Leslie Kritzer. And there's also Michael Urie and Alex Brightman.
I have such a sentimental attachment to that film, The Monty Python and the Holy Grail, which I had really memorized as a child. You know, it had been adapted into this musical that is mainly based on that film, although it borrows from other things as well. So I couldn't help comparing it in my little head to the screen version that I preferred. But now, with some time, I'm actually, I haven't seen it since, and I'm looking forward to another experience of it.
To round out this part, I Need That. I Need That is the title of the play. Danny DeVito stars alongside his daughter, Lucy DeVito, and Anthony Thomas. He's the hoarder in a new play by Teresa Rebeck.
I Need That is a comedy about a man and his daughter and his best friend. It's a lot of emotional heart and
stuff, a lot of stuff.
A lot of stuff.
Danny DeVito, I adore as an actor. He's a delightful presence. He was in the off-Broadway production of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest in the early 70s, in the part that he ended up playing in the movie, Martini. And then, of course, he became a big television star. I'm curious to see how he's going to be at the center of this play, acting with his daughter. He was very good in The Price, but it was a supporting part. And he's, he must be in his late 70s at this point. So it's going to be interesting to see him carry a show.
And like The Price, it actually is about looking back at things, what you need to take along. Anyway, thank you so much. We're going to look on the bright side of life, as Spamalot sings, when we come back. Great. We covered a lot of ground. We're taking a short break. When we return, we'll look at the choice picks off-Broadway, which has always been a thriving pipeline to Broadway. Hello, I'm Patrick Pacheco. We're back. I'm now with critics Helen Shaw of The New Yorker, Adam Feldman of Time Out New York, and Zachary Stewart of TheaterMania to talk about the exciting off-Broadway shows this season. Adam, let's start with you about a show that I think we're all very excited about, and that is Scene Partners. Diane Wiest's return to off-Broadway by John J. Caswell, who wrote Wet Brain, and directed by Rachel Chavkin, set in 1985. It has an odd premise, which is a 75-year-old woman is hell-bent on becoming a movie star, leaving Milwaukee for LA.
This premise describes itself as the description of it is genre twisting.
Yeah.
So I do expect that there will be surprises beyond the one-line elevator pitch of it. Diane Wiest is just one of my heroes as an actor. I can watch her do anything, and I suspect that this will be not just anything. Rachel Chavkin is, of course, a terrific director, recently seen in Hadestown and other things. And this is one that I don't know what to expect from, and that is very exciting to me.
Another play that I'm not quite sure what to expect of is Poor Yella Rednecks. And it's a play with music. Tell us about that, Zach.
Yeah, this is Qui Gwyn, who is one of my big heroes of the New York theater. I think for Qui Gwyn, this is a more personal story. This is the sequel for his play Viet Gone, which was very much about his parents who fled South Vietnam during the fall of Saigon and ended up in a refugee camp in Arkansas, which is where he grew up. So this is the sequel to that, right? The continuing saga of this Vietnamese family in a trailer park in Arkansas. I can't wait to see it.
Another thrilling addition to the off-Broadway season is Spain by Jen Silverman. Helen, what do you think?
You know, Jen Silverman is an interesting playwright. I had a lot of trouble with some of her earlier plays, but she then wrote a novel that absolutely knocked my socks off called We Play Ourselves, which laid out within the novel kind of her theatrical ethos. And I loved that book so much that the fact that she is now returning to second stage, actually, with this show, which is about a film crew in 1936 trying to make a movie that will get the U.S. to sort of support the people fighting for freedom in Spain. I'm kind of excited all over again to see how she sort of fuses those two parts of her artistry, how being a novelist has changed that. And then it also happens to star honestly my favorite actress, who's Marin Ireland. So I'm sort of thrilled in two ways.
And the interesting little tidbit about this is that this film is produced by the KGB, or what was then the precursor of the KGB.
The NKDV?
The movie within the movie is written by Hemingway and John Dos Passos, right? I mean, it's got characters,
playful,
historical characters mixed with invented ones.
Yeah.
Another revival, and we've seen quite a lot of them, is Waiting for Godot. Helen, what do you think this particular cast may enlighten us about this extraordinary play of the 20th century?
Well,
we're talking about Michael Shannon and Paul Sparks.
Yes. All of us, I think, will have seen The Killer, also at Theater for a New Audience, which is this Brooklyn theater which does tremendous productions. The two of them, Paul Sparks and Michael Shannon, have been friends for ages, and they did a production of Ionesco's The Killer, directed by Darko Tresniak at this theater. And the two of them, do you guys remember when this was? 2017, 2018? Does that sound right? And it was marvelous.
What? This is the notorious photo of the Colonel. You had it in there. You never said a word.
And one of the things that was so delightful about it is that they were trying to crack each other up. You will see that this is a theme for me in this season. And they did, in fact, successfully crack each other up. And Paul Sparks would just demolish Michael Shannon. And if you know Michael Shannon is, he's the size of a sequoia. He's got it's like having a redwood on stage, just absolutely dissolving in giggles. And I have really held that memory of The Killer very tightly for years. And so the idea of the two of them coming with that kind of sense of insouciance to Waiting for Godot. Oh, see, I say Godot, even though I thought it was Godot. Anyway, it's a Rorschach test. I'm just excited to see that. And then the other two, Jay Nadeau is also in it, and Jeff Beal. And both of them are also hilarious. I teach this play, and I'm always very seriously telling my students that it is a comedy and it is hilarious. And then they read it and they say it is depressing and existential. And I think this production has a real shot at being rip-roaringly funny.
Do you think of it as a comedy?
It certainly uses a lot of comedy throughout. Moment to moment, it plays as a comedy a lot of the time, and it should, even if you think that the end is ultimately very despairing in some way. So I think it's very important. Otherwise, it gets very boring. The play, and it's not. I don't think it's supposed to be boring.
Yeah, it's an Irish comedy through a French lens. So take that how you will. I mean, Beckett lives or dies on the performers. It's what that extra special sauce the performers bring to the text that can't really be quantified. And this is an extraordinary cast, so I'm really looking forward to see what they do, which I think should be very different than when this was last on Broadway with Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart.
Say, I am happy. I am happy. So am I. So am I. We are happy. We are happy. What do we do now that we're happy?
Can each of you say what is funny about the play?
Somebody tries to hang themselves and their pants fall down.
Great.
It is. They're vaudevillians. They're passing time with each other, making the time go by and amusing each other various ways. And you need that feeling. We're all filling our time.
Zach?
My very favorite playwright of all time is Charles Ludlam, who would have, in his own way, been influenced by Beckett. And he always said, you are a living mockery of your own ideals. And I think what's hilarious about Godot, is that they're saying, we should go, and then they never do. And how many people do we know like that in our own lives?
Yeah, totally. I think about that all the time.
That's why there's no subscription audiences anymore, is they say we should go, but...
That's a good point. Can you pitch, please subscribe? Please subscribe. Another play that is part of the Off-Broadway season is All the Devils Are Here. Patrick Page takes us on this journey through Shakespeare's villainy.
Come, you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts. Do you believe in evil spirits?
It was a streaming production during COVID, which I saw and which I loved. And it's fascinating, Zach, that the villain always steals the show. Why is that?
Well, if you have Patrick Page playing your villain, it's, there's no competition. I mean, Broadway audiences will know him as Hades from Hadestown. He has this wonderful bass baritone voice that he could read the phone book in, and you'd be absolutely riveted.
How does the wall keep us free? My children, how does the wall keep us free?
He's played quite a few Shakespearean villains, so I can't wait to see him slip in and out of these characters and bring a little insight on exactly how Shakespeare's concept of villainy and evil still resonates today. This is the Stephen Greenblatt part of the show. I have been seeing this man hit the gym very, very hard in the last month. He's training for this like an Olympic athlete. So I think this is going to be something very special.
Deeper than did ever plummet sound. I'll drown my book.
Helen, who's the most memorable or favorite villain in the Shakespeare canon for you?
Well, Iago's pretty good. And Othello's a tricky one because every time I see the play Othello, I think, I don't want to see this play again. I'm done. I hate this play so much. And yet, Iago is so delicious and so evil and so slimy. And I've been very happy to see some good Iagos. I saw Daniel Craig as Iago. Corey Stoll did Iago in the Park. I guess that's the one that jumps immediately to mind. I mean, of course, Petruchio in Taming of the Shrew is the real dirty dog.
He seems to have gotten more villainous as we've moved on in culture in terms of, it's his anti-feminism.
That's true. Although I saw, again in the Park, I saw Janet McTeer play Petruchio, and I thought I would give Petruchio the time of day. I would give that person the time of day.
Adam, what villain would you give the time of day?
I would probably say, I guess, Richard III. It's an early Shakespeare play, and he's still exploring the joy he finds in that villainy, and the joy that the villain takes in himself, and sort of bragging about it to the audience, and taking us into complicity with his complots. It's a lovely tension that you have as an audience that you're so excited to watch.
Anyway, we have to move on to the musicals, of which there are quite a few, actually, considering it's off-Broadway. Here We Are. It's the most exciting thing and certainly the most talked about.
What excites me about Here We Are is the same thing that excites everyone else. It's the last chance to hear a large-scale new work by Stephen Sondheim. We still might have bits and pieces and dribs and drabs of songs that we haven't heard before popping up here and there, but this is the first major product of that amazing intelligence and imagination. And even if it turns out not to be fully complete, because it looks like well, we know that it was not finished in a traditional sense, you'll come to it with so much excitement and interest because of the nature of the piece that I feel like every one of us, not just critics, but everyone in the audience is going to come to this with a generosity and an openness because of the knowledge that it's the last one that we'll have.
And Helen, it's based on two Louis Buñuel classics, The Exterminating Angel and The Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie. What makes David Ives perhaps the right person to do the book?
I think because one of his talents as a comic playwright is claustrophobia, and both of those films are kind of hinge on claustrophobia. Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie, at least people get out of the house. Exterminating Angel, you never get out of 2 rooms, but watching people sort of trip themselves up, sort of like make their own little barriers for themselves and then trip over them, is very much the weird vibe of both of those films. The sort of the recognizable part inside their absurdity, and so Ives, I think, also has that absurdist. It has a dark-edged absurdist humor as well.
Zach, a revival that we haven't seen since 1962 is I Can Get It For You Wholesale. It's a musical by Jerome Weidman and Harold Rome, originally directed by Arthur Lawrence. Obviously, it introduced Barbra Streisand as Miss Marblestein, and it's headed by Santino Fontana and Judy Kuhn, and Julia Lester, who was in Into the Woods, is playing Miss Marblestein. What do you think?
This has kind of fallen into the assassin slot that Classic Stage had a couple of seasons ago, right? You get this incredible cast to do a musical that, this is probably not as well known as Assassins, but that's coming back, and it draws people in. I think it's wonderful. I don't know this musical at all, so I'm really looking forward to seeing it.
Well, the other connection to Assassins is that John Weidman, who wrote Assassins with Stephen Sondheim, is the son of Jerome Weidman, who wrote I Can Get It For You Wholesale, and has apparently done some revisions to the text for this production. So that will be very interesting. But the cast, as you say, the cast, it goes beyond the people that we've already said. The cast is extraordinary in this revival.
A very hot ticket at the Public Theater is Hell's Kitchen, with a book by Christopher Diaz and music by Alicia Keys. think it's Alicia Keys, is the reason it's a hot ticket, because it's about her growing up in Hell's Kitchen at the very building I live in, Manhattan Plaza. She grew up there. Timothée Chalamet grew up there. I think Sam Jackson. He was a security guard. It has a very In the Heights vibe. What do you think?
But in Hell's Kitchen.
In Hell's Kitchen.
I know very little about this musical, but I like Alicia Keys, and I can't wait to see it. I think it's always good when popular artists come and they want to work in the New York theater or the New York stage. I think it's always great if we're conversing with that.
2 strong recommendations for it. It's directed by Michael Greif, and it's choreographed by Camille A. Brown, who's doing fantastic work. Another one is The Gardens of Annuncia, with book, music, and lyrics by Michael John LaChiusa. How do you evaluate his work?
I'm a big fan of his work. I mean, he's a real serious musical theater auteur in his way, and some of the projects have been more successful than others, but his Wild Party is one of my favorite shows of the 21st century, from the favorite musicals of the 21st century. I really like Hello Again. I really like Queen of the Mist. He's written a lot of shows that have a lot of substance to them. This one is a tribute to Graciela Daniel, the director choreographer. And so it's sort of inspired by her childhood in Argentina.
Her growing up.
She's directing it and co-choreographing it. Lincoln Center has a long relationship with LaChiusa, and they do stand by their artists, and that helps cultivate an audience for them, which I like.
Well, maybe he'll score with this one.
Well,
I hope so.
I guess what's refreshing about this is the other musicals that we've just discussed all seem to have aspirations for Broadway, right? We're trying out off-Broadway, and maybe we'll move on and do that. I don't get that sense with this. It's just going to live where it lives at the Lincoln Center, and it's going to do what it does. And I think that's kind of refreshing for a show to know that about itself.
Pal Joey is going to be revived. It's always been a problem show.
Well, this version is.
This version,
the original is not, and it has a wonderful score by Rodgers and Hart, and one of their last collaborations before Rodgers went on to move to work with Oscar Hammerstein. The book has often been faulted. John O'Hara's book that's based on the. I mean,
that's right. It's John O'Hara's short stories for the New Yorker.
They've fiddled with it a lot over the years, and it's also it's straddling that line before the integrated musical revolution of Oklahoma. So you can still play around with it in a different way because it's not quite as dramatically grounded. And they've tried it many times. This one is going to have the Pal Joey that they're doing at City Center has a new book co-written by Richard LaGravenese. They're adding an interracial aspect to it. So now Vera, the older
rich socialite,
is going to be played by Elizabeth Stanley, who's white, and Pal Joey is going to be Ephraim Sykes, who's black.
What I was saying a prayer for, someone I really could care for.
So that will add a different, maybe, dimension to the already intergenerational romance between the two of them. Savion Glover is directing it and choreographing it. Choreographing it.
Yeah.
So he's also going to be appearing in it and dancing with some really great tap dance. It's really an exciting prospect to see this done. And there was talk of it coming to Broadway, and so this, I think, is maybe a half step towards that, but it'll be very interesting to see what they're doing.
It's interesting when you talk about problem plays from the past, and obviously we talked about one earlier, that was Merrily We Roll Along.
They're not totally equatable, though, because no one's getting their claws into the book of Merrily in the way that they are with Pal Joey. Pal Joey, there are separate components that people like different amounts, liking the score more than the book, so they will change the book to match the score, at least hopefully, right? As opposed to simply something which has had a troubled production history because it is not necessarily particularly feel-good and had a legendarily terrible first production or legendarily fraught first production. So I don't think that it's quite that they are both problem musicals. It's more that There are some pieces which you can tell they haven't found their time. I'm just thrilled to see new artists making something new out of something old.
We'll see how well the shows that we've just discussed bond with the audience. And as you said, Helen, in terms of how they reflect this time in our culture, in our country, and in the world. So I want to thank you for joining us, and we'll reunite later and hopefully look on the brighter side of some of this stuff. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you, Patrick.
And thank you for joining us. We look forward to bringing you more fascinating conversations with artists and professionals as New York theater, The Fabulous Invalid, takes its invaluable place in American culture. I'm Patrick Pacheco.